So hello everyone. I would like to invite all our speakers to activate your camera because I think we can slowly start our session of today, and let's wait until of course we're gonna let a participant going in, but we can smoothly start our session. Thank you for being here with us, our speakers, and also our participants that are interested by the Vietnamese market. Before giving the floor to our invited speakers, I would like to make a short introduction of our project and why we are organizing this webinar. So you're participating a webinar and organized under the European project Farm to Fork Health Matters. This project regroups 5 EU clusters, as you can see here on the map, and leading by us by Organised in Belgium. We provide support to EU SMEs, especially those providing healthy products, ingredients, and or solutions that are having health beneficial for people, and biosolutions for the agriculture part. We are targeting 5 countries, including Vietnam, as you can see in the right side. And I won't give too much detail because today the mission is to give you a very concrete and focus on food legislation and food supplement legislation of the market. But however, if you are interested by the other countries, you can follow us on LinkedIn and also visit our website, because we are doing market studies that are freely downloadable in this framework of the project. So our speakers of the day, we have Patricia and Jean-Pierre with us. Patricia is the consultant on the International Business Advisory Team in Desanshiran Association in Vietnam. So prior to joining the organization, Patricia gained experience advising Spanish companies at the Spanish Economic and Commercial Office in Vietnam as an international trade advisor, focusing on the food and beverage sector. And within Desanshiran Association, she's guiding foreign investors through their market entering process into Vietnam, from pre-entering assessment to corporate structuring, and ongoing support, of course, with tax, accounting, and payroll colleagues in the association. And we also have Jean-Pierre from the Wallonia Export and Investment Agency, Trade and Investment Consortium. So thanks to him, we get in touch with Patricia and Desanshiran associations, and we have the honor to have this webinar happen. A quick view on the agenda that is already shared with you in the invitation is we're gonna first have an overview on the trade in Vietnam, the regulations for packaged food and food supplements, the different distribution channels, and also consumer trends. What are the opportunities for SMEs? So I will let the floor to Patricia, and for those who have questions, please do not hesitate to write in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Joan. As she said, my name is Patricia Aranguren. I am from Madrid in Spain, and I am now working as an international business advisor at Desanshiran Associates in Vietnam, and I hope I will be able to give you some interesting insights about Vietnam today in this session. But first, let me do a little introduction about Desanshiran. We as a firm are an Asian consulting company with about 500 employees, which has been helping many foreign investors to gain foothold in East, Southeast, and South Asia since 1992. You can see on the flags under the screen here, the regions where we are based. And by the way, you can also find me on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out there to me directly if you have any questions as well. Next slide, please. So Desanshiran, we have been in Vietnam since 2008, and we now have 3 offices in Hanoi, in Da Nang, and in Ho Chi Minh City, where I am based. and a little bit about what we do. Next slide, please. About how we exactly help our clients. So you can see here pre-market entry consulting with our business intelligence unit, where our team creates customized reports for clients regarding, for example, country comparisons or trade barriers for certain products. We can do a distributor search, product research, competitor analysis, market entry models. Then we go on to the corporate establishment with all legal related matters with our specialized legal team. And after that, once the company is set up, we support our clients with all possible compliance services when operating a business, like related to taxes, to accounting, audits, human resources, and IT solutions. Next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, we have recently launched an online portal. It's called Doing Business in Vietnam. It is of free access, and it is an additional resource that we have created for to provide a compact overview on market entry, to answer why Vietnam, where in Vietnam, which industries in Vietnam, and how to do it in Vietnam. So how to open a business, how to find a reliable partner. And to date, we have this portal for Vietnam and same portal for China, for India, for Indonesia, and for Singapore. And now I'm done with that introduction. So on to today's topic. This is the agenda for my presentation. I will first do a little introduction about Vietnam, then the free trade agreement with the European Union, how to export into Vietnam, the regulatory landscape, and a market entry strategy. So next slide, please. First, some information about Vietnam and Vietnam's evolution from, at least in my experience, what many people still imagine when you mention Vietnam to where we are today. So the Vietnam War ended in 1975. And then in 1986, the Doi Moi, the economic reforms were initiated with the goal of creating a socialist-oriented market economy. So these reforms are similar to China's reforms, but obviously with some differences. Probably the most important difference is that these economic reforms also came with foreign policy reforms, with Vietnam exiting civil wars. And this allowed Vietnam to normalize their diplomatic and trade relations with Western countries, and to have certain embargoes and trade restrictions that they had at the moment removed. So with these relations being mostly normalized by the early to mid-90s, Vietnam has been able to join larger regional and international organizations. For example, the World Trade Organization in 2007, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation in 1998, and well, the European Union Vietnam Free Trade Agreement that I will talk about later was signed in June 2019. And yeah, thank you. So Vietnam economy at a glance. 2002, so last year, presented the fastest annual GDP growth in Vietnam since 1997. And it was much higher at 8.02% than the official growth target at that moment, which was 6 to 6.5%. This is, of course, faster than the expansion of 2021, when there was still a recovery for COVID, which was, I think, 2.6%. So this GDP growth last year was driven mainly by strong domestic retail sales and exports. And well, now it is facing headwinds. This year, the growth is not going to be as impressive. It is, for the first half of this year of 2023, the growth has been of 3.7%. Exports have continued to grow, though not as high as the year before. This is interesting because, well, for foreign invested enterprises in Vietnam, they account for about 70% of the total exports of the country. And foreign direct investment, there has been an increase from 2021. This is the fastest FDI disbursement growth that we have seen in the 5 years, and we are finally moving above pre-pandemic levels again. Also about the investor countries, we had 116 investor countries in 2020, so the growth to 141, it shows the continued attractiveness of the Vietnamese market for the foreign investors. Next slide, please. about the trade partners. We have the imports and exports here, ranked by the trade partners. All the countries in the ranking are in the exact same order in 2022 as they were in 2021, but there have been some changes. Mainly, there has been an increased amount of imports from China, and a dramatic growth of exports to the United States. And the EU, we can see it is the sixth main importer for Vietnam, in the column on the left, and on the right, the third main export market for Vietnam. Next slide, please. Here I want to show you how many free trade agreements Vietnam is a part of. All of this is related to what I mentioned before about trying to normalize trade and diplomatic relations. So we have the free trade agreement with the European Union, of course, but also with the UK, with Japan, with Canada, with Mexico. Well, you can see all of them here. We'll share with you the presentation later so you can take a look for longer. Next slide, please. And about the trade composition of Vietnam. Overall, the trade in goods in Vietnam was up by 9.1% in 2022. The imports rose almost 8%. Exports also grew, but exports, of course, outweigh still imports in Vietnam, so there is a trade surplus. Focusing on the exports, the most exported products are machine equipments, tools and instruments, footwear, textiles, telephones, and fishery products. So looking at this growth and the composition of the exports, we can see that Vietnam is still mainly exporting products that are at the lower end of the value chain, but it is increasingly moving towards higher value products. So the import growth was mainly driven by growth in imports of, we can see here, of oil and petroleum products, chemicals, and computers and related products. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Now about the European Union Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. Next slide. It was signed in 2019 and it entered into force on the 1st of August of 2020. The agreement eliminates 99% of import tariffs within 7 to 10 years. So right now in 2023, we have about 4 years left of tariff dismantlement for most products. And as we saw before, the EU is the third most important export market for Vietnam. Besides Singapore, Vietnam is the only ASEAN country with a free trade agreement with the European Union, which is also very interesting in my opinion. Next slide, please. I wanted to explain a little bit about how the agreement works for the tariff dismantlement. So here are some examples. Basically, the agreement, the free trade agreement, gives each product, which are classified by HS codes, a tariff dismantlement timeline. They can be classified as A, B3, B5, B7, B9, B10, and B50, B11. And this classification basically tells us how many years it will take for the tariff to be reduced to zero. So for example, for processed fruits, the second line, before the free trade agreement, the tariff was 30%. And then since it is classified as B7, it will take 8 years for the tariff to reach zero in 2027. So we see that each year the tariff is reduced the same amount until we get to 2027 when it is 0%. For some other products, like for example, for beer, they have longer dismantlement period. I think for beer it is 11 years, but most food products will have a 0% tariff by 2027. Next slide, please. Regarding the exports from the European Union to Vietnam, although the free trade agreement entered into force in 2020, of course, in 2020 we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which had a huge effect on the trade flows in that same year. So in 2021, we can see there was a recovery, still not back to pre-pandemic levels. And 2022, we did get back to more or less pre-pandemic levels. The European Union's main exports to Vietnam are high-tech products, including electrical machinery and equipment, aircraft, vehicles, and pharmaceutical products. This year, it is expected that the trend will continue in a similar fashion. So we will not see a very high increase, but more or less probably maintain the same levels as 2022. About the main exporters into Vietnam from the EU, so the main countries, well, we can see them here: Germany, Belgium, Italy, France. I want to tell you a little bit about what their main exports are into Vietnam. So Germany and France, they mainly export aircraft and pharmaceutical products. Well, not mainly, but it's the biggest part of their export is aircraft and pharmaceutical products. Belgium's main exports are pharmaceutical products as well. And pharmaceutical products are a very important part of the exports also from Netherlands, Poland, and Spain, and Italy. And for Italy, their most exported products was tanned hides. Next slide, please. Thank you. About the tax duties of imported products. Unfortunately, even though the free trade agreement does get rid of a big part of the import duties, there are still some taxes that are still applicable for the sale of these products in Vietnam. So the first, of course, is the VAT, the value added tax. The general rate for VAT in Vietnam is of 10%, although it was reduced in July for many products to 8% until the end of December of this year to encourage economic growth and recovery. However, for some products, like for alcoholic beverages, it is still 10%. These alcoholic beverages, they also have the special consumption tax, which is between 65 and 35%, depending on the alcohol content. It says here on the slide that this tax is only for alcohol products. That is true when looking at the food and beverage sector, but there are other products like cigarettes or cars and many services that are also subject to this special consumption tax. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now about exporting to Vietnam. Next slide. So the Vietnam consumer market. Vietnam has a population of almost 100 million people with a median age of 33 years old. So it is a very young population. Only around 37% live in big cities, but this rate is increasing pretty fast. So with this increase of higher urban population and with the economic growth, there's also an increase in the middle class. It is actually expected that by 2030, the middle class in Vietnam will grow from 30 million people now to around 95 million people. So in the map on the right, you can see the main cities in Vietnam. Of course, Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi are the biggest. They have the highest population and the highest GDP, but the second-tier cities like Haiphong or Da Nang and Canton have also been growing steadily these past few years, and they will continue to grow with the increase of urban population as well. Next slide, please. About the packaged food market. So as the Vietnam consumer, as we saw before in the previous slide, becomes more affluent, there will be non-price attributes that become more important in their decision-making process for purchasing food in general, and especially packaged food. So price sensitivity will likely decline, and they will prioritize other attributes such as trust. You can see here trust and taste preferences. Overall, the quality and taste are the top two most important attributes that consumers are willing to pay more money for. And companies that are competing in the food and beverage categories should consider strategies to build a strong reputation with brand associations of high quality and product differentiation. The European origin is also highly valued as it is really associated with quality. Something interesting also about these packaged food sales is that the taste and preferences of the consumer really vary from north to south. So Southern Vietnamese, they really favor more sweet and spicy flavors, while in the north, they're not big fans of the sweetness and they will prefer more savory, less sugary taste. This is interesting to know because traditional Vietnamese food really relies on natural, fresh ingredients, and the flavors can be strong, herbs and commonly used. There's always salty, fishy flavors. And in some cases, so in the south, the food will be sweet, not so much in the north. However, for example, rice is a key staple in all of Vietnam. Next slide, please. About imported packaged food. The top imported products from each group, so from processed meats, cocoa, processed fruit, sugar, the top imported products from each group are cane sugar, baked goods such as pastry, bread, or cakes, sauces and mixed condiments, processed fruits and nuts, and noodles and pasta. In this market, as you can see on the graphic on the right, the imports from the EU take the fourth place after ASEAN, China, and the USA. Next slide, please. So the consumer profile for packaged foods. Some key demographic considerations that you should keep in mind when identifying the profile of likely consumers of these food products. You can see them here. It's important to keep in mind the urban-rural divide of the population. So the majority of the population of Vietnam is still rural, although the urban share is on the rise. Urban consumers, they have higher levels of average income. They have almost twice the level of disposable income as rural consumers, and they have better access to modern retail channels. So the consumer of imported food products will most likely come from these urban areas. The millennials are currently the largest consumer group of the whole Vietnamese population. Their shopping habits and motivations, they also make them very interesting consumers. And older millennials, which are aged 30 to 39, they are the least likely to focus on bargain hunting. So they care a lot more about the quality of the items they purchase rather than the quantity or the price. So they are most likely as well to focus in buying ecologically or ethically conscious goods, and they have the second highest level of income. Generation C, the young adults under 25s, they are either at the beginning of their working lives or they are finishing their studies. So they do not yet have high levels of average income, but going forward, they will be a key demographic in Vietnam. Not only because of their increased incomes, but it's also because of the different experiences that they have lived compared to previous generation. This generation grew up during a time of rapid change in the country. They are the first generation to have been exposed to a great extent to Western ideas from a very young age. So they embrace the concepts of individuality a lot more and the right to indulge than previous generation. This leads us to two types of consumers, which span the groups above. So the impulsive spenders, this is a fairly numerous type of consumer. They appreciate premium and luxury products, but they also focus on prices. Sales and discounts are a good method to attract them. Fundamentally, they are open to trying new products if the price is right. So ease of purchase is an important criteria for them. So sales through online channels can be very attractive for impulsive spenders. And about undaunted strivers, they are less numerous, but they are very sensitive to following the latest trends. And so branding is very key for these consumers. They are very open to trying new products, and celebrity endorsement and social media promotion can be very effective in reaching them. This type of consumer, they generally have a higher level of income. So also interesting to know is that recent years have seen the population of Vietnam in general become more self-conscious, not self-conscious, sorry, health-conscious. And this has been reflected as well in a very strong acceleration of the health and wellness trend across packaged foods. Next slide, please. About food supplements. So we can see that the European Union is the fourth importer of food supplements into Vietnam. If we compare it to the slides before with the origins of other packaged foods, we can see that the only significant ASEAN country here is Singapore. And the rest of the countries are China, USA, European Union, Japan. So it is a different origin generally than most packaged foods. And as for the main countries that export food supplements into Vietnam from the European Union, well, we have Germany, France, Spain, Poland, you can see here. Next slide, please. About the consumer profile for food supplements. So traditionally, consumers for food supplements in Vietnam have been urban and of an advanced age, with a high purchasing power, and they use these products in order to treat specific ailments that they had already. However, in the recent years, there have been two factors that have contributed to change this trend and to make food supplements attractive to a wider variety of consumers. So first of all, the increase in standard of living has made the purchasing power of more consumers higher, and the health concerns related to COVID-19 have just changed the approach of the Vietnamese consumer to food supplements. Now they seek to take supplements not only to treat specific ailments, but as a preventative measure and to maintain their health as well. So for example, we have here for students who are looking for supplements to enhance their memory and to protect their eyesight. Many women will use them for anti-aging and for weight control. There is a general also preference from in all these groups for supplements that have a natural or herbal origin rather than synthetic, and many consumers will use these supplements to self-medicate. This is a product where, for the consumer, the country of origin really is equated with quality. So that is why they will prefer products from the European Union, from the US, or from Japan and Korea, rather than maybe with an origin from China. Next slide, please. About the regulatory landscape, so how to import into Vietnam. The procedure for importation of packaged foods generally and food supplements has 3 steps. So first, it's the product self-declaration or the registration of product declaration. This depends on the product. I will expand on it later. Then the certificate of compliance with food import requirements and the customs clearance and payment of customs duties. Next slide, please. So the product self-declaration or registration of product declaration. The first step is to obtain a product self-declaration or the registration, yeah. So most packaged food only need the product self-declaration, while the registration of product declaration is required for certain products like health protective foods, for medical nutrition, etc. In order to obtain the self-declaration, the exporter should prepare the documents, including the self-declaration form and a copy of the food safety evaluation report. This report has to specify the safety indicators prescribed by the Ministry of Health or the standards applied by the supplier if there's no relevant regulations by the Ministry of Health for this product. Regarding the registration of the product declaration, the exporter will also need to prepare other documents such as the certificate of free sale, the certificate of exportation or health certificate, and documents about scientific evidence of the effects of the product or ingredients. The exporter will then submit the documents to the designated receiving authority. For the self-declaration, the exporter only needs to post it through mass media like a website or the premises, and is entitled to manufacture and sell the product. For the registration of product declaration, the exporter will have to wait at least 7 working days after the submission for the verification from the authorities. And after the verification, a certificate of the registered product declaration will be issued and it will be posted on the authorities' websites. Then the product is applicable for manufacturing and for public consumption. There is no fee to obtain the product self-declaration. However, to obtain the registration, there is a specific inspection fee that it is required, and it ranges from around 20 to 60 euros, depending on the type of product and the amount, the number of products. Next slide, please. About the certificate of compliance with food import requirements. So before the goods are imported into Vietnam, they will be subject to inspection by the state. The goods are divided into 3 categories for inspection. It can be a simplified inspection, an ordinary inspection, or a tightened inspection. It is important to keep in mind that goods that have a registration of product declaration, they are exempt from inspection unless there is a food safety warning. So the goods that are subject to simplified inspection will be directly inspected by the customs authority, and they will be granted customs clearance if they pass the inspection. The goods subject to ordinary and tightened inspection also need a certificate of compliance with food import requirements for the customs clearance. This document includes a registration form, product self-declaration, and the packing list. And if the exporter would like to switch from tightened inspection to ordinary inspection, it is possible. They should prepare 3 copies of notices of satisfactory results of consecutive tightened inspections, and then they can submit them to the inspecting authority. And that way they will be able to just do ordinary inspections from then on. It takes 3 working days from the receipt of application for ordinary inspection and 7 for the tightened inspection. Then once the exporter receives the certificate, it has to be submitted to the customs authority to be granted the customs clearance. The application fee we have here, it ranges from around 13 euros to 40 euros, depending on the inspection category. And for the tightened inspection, there is an extra fee of around 4 euros per product that will be charged if there are there's more than one product per lot. Next slide, please. All right, so the customs clearance and payment of custom duties. This last step is to prepare the documents for customs clearance and the payment of the customs duties. So the exporter should prepare some general documents for exportation, including the commercial invoice, the packing list, the certificate of free sale, and as well as the certificate of origin, whether it is preferential or non-preferential. So most of the documents prepared by the exporter, they can be in English, but for the packing list, it is recommended to have it both in English and in Vietnamese to facilitate the process. The other necessary documents and procedures will be prepared and undertaken by the importers and the agents in Vietnam. So the custom duties and clearance costs, they should be paid before the customs clearance. And of course, the duties include the import tax and the value-added tax, which will depend on the type of good and origin. And other fees that the exporter has to pay are the import declaration form, which is around 80 cents of a euro, and the customs inspection fee, which will be around 8 euros. This is only in case that the products require intellectual property protection. Next slide, please. Thank you. About the labeling requirements, I have included here an example of these are cheese wafers. So the label is in Vietnamese, but it shows all the general labeling requirements. So of course the label must be in Vietnamese. It is possible to keep the original label as well, only if it is the same size or smaller than the Vietnamese label, and if the contents in the foreign language label are exactly the same as the contents in the Vietnamese label. So in the label of these cheese wafers, you can see that besides the general information that you would expect to find on a label, there's also some information like the product's use and the target users and the name. This is very important, the name of the manufacturer and the importer responsible for the product. Then, thank you. And some special requirements. So the label before was just a general labeling rules, but for some specific products require specific labeling instructions. So in particular, for functional foods, the label must clarify that the food cannot replace medicine, and it must contain the phrase functional food. This same requirement applies to irradiated food and for genetically modified food as well. They must add that they are either irradiated food or genetically modified food into the label in Vietnamese. And besides the 10 general requirements that I showed you on the previous slide, food additives must have information on the scope, dosage, and use on the label, as well as the phrase used for food in bold letters of minimum size that is of 2 millimeters minimum. Next slide, please. Thank you. So importing wafers into Vietnam. This is just after seeing all these explanations, an example about how specifically we would import these cheese wafers into Vietnam. So VHS code, we have it here, 19053220. The import procedure for the wafer has 3 steps. This one is product self-declaration because it doesn't require the registration. So important is that the food safety evaluation report must not be more than 12 months old. After the product self-declaration, obtaining the certificate of compliance with food import requirements. So this product is subject to ordinary inspection. So the exporter will need to prepare the registration form, the product self-declaration, and the packing list in English and Vietnamese. And finally, preparing the general documents for the customs clearance. So the invoice, the bill of lading, the certificate of origin, this insurance certificate, certificate of compliance with food import requirements, the manifest, you can see all of them there. Next slide, please. Now about the market entry strategy. Next slide. Thank you. So there's 2 modes of entry to make an entrance into the Vietnam market. You can either set up a legal entity or not set up a legal entity. For the purpose of this webinar, I am going to focus on the entry method of finding a partner or distributor in the market. So you do not need to set up a legal entity if you find a distributor. If you want to cooperate with a partner, you would need to set up a legal entity in Vietnam. So I will focus more on the well, first I will talk more about how to identify a reliable partner and then about the distributor. Yeah, sorry. Next slide, please. So how to identify a reliable partner? This process, we say, it takes 5 steps. So first, it's very important to establish correct criteria for the partner that you're looking for. This is, of course, up to you, but some criteria that should be kept in mind is the strength and experience of the partner in the relevant sector, their geographical outreach, so whether they are focused maybe only on the south of Vietnam or they have a nationwide reach. It is also very important to value their network, so both with other stakeholders and with the customers, and if they are up to date with all the relevant regulations. The information of the potential partners, this is how we work. The information of the potential partners will be collected and examined. So first a long list, then there will be a short list, then an outreach to the potential partners and a discussion of the possibility of collaboration. Some tips to find a reliable partner is first, it's very important to conduct insightful research on the potential partners, but also on the market. You have to know about their ability, their constraints, and their other business activities that they may have. You should align also your focus products and target markets with the ability of the potential partners to achieve the most efficient outcomes. Okay, next slide, please. And now that you have maybe found a potential partner in Vietnam, some important things to keep in mind about Vietnam business etiquette. There's of course a lot more, but some interesting points are, of course, be punctual. If possible, you should bring some physical brochures about your company in English and in Vietnamese. All the relevant documents, bring them also in Vietnamese, and business cards. Physical business cards are also very important in Vietnam. Also about Vietnamese, you may find that in many meetings, even if your potential partner can't speak English, they will prefer to work with a translator or with an interpreter, sorry. So in this vein, also face-to-face meetings are also preferred, and negotiations tend to take a while. When making introductions, it is customary to begin with the highest ranking person and then go in order of importance with everybody else. Social conversation is very important, building relationships. You can bring gifts, that really depends, but yeah, I think covered all. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to present you a short case study that we worked on recently to help a company, an international company, find a local distributor for collagen in Vietnam. So the product that was going to be imported here is a type of functional food, and the exporter were looking for an exclusive distributor. So their criteria included the ability to import this specific type of product, which was a food supplement, and trading experience in the supplement field, as well as having a large-scale distribution channel in the Vietnamese market. So first, we developed a list of potential distributors based on the company's criteria. We found 24 suitable companies, which we divided into 3 categories. First, companies that specialize in supplements. The second, companies with low-profile importation sources. And the third, companies with diversified medical products portfolios. After the outreach process, we set up 3 meetings for the exporter with the potential companies. And after the meetings, which took place face-to-face with companies that were already familiar with the exporter's product, thanks to the outreach process, the exporter then successfully entered into a 3-year agreement with one distributor who belongs to the first category of distributors having a strong focus on supplements. In this agreement, they outlined the responsibilities of the distributor to include all the registration procedures, all sales and marketing in Vietnam market, while the exporter also committed to offering some training to the distributor on the use of the products if necessary. I think this is all from me. Thank you very much for listening and for your time. And let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Patricia. It's a very good overview of the market and about the regulations. I don't see any questions, but maybe I will let some minutes to people who want to react. And in the meantime, I have some questions actually regarding when you explain the different procedure of the food inspections. So you have simplified inspections, and how this is divided. Is automatic divided, or is depending on the nature of the product?
It depends on the nature of the product. Yes.
So
sometimes in the country of origin as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
And before going ahead, so we will still let some more times for people to ask the questions in the chat, in the QA sessions. And what I have to forget in the introductions is about the economic mission to Vietnam for Wallonia companies from 25th November and 2nd December. I will let Jean-Pierre to present it and also make a word regarding this session.
Thank you very much, Yuan. Thank you also to Patricia for this very comprehensive and focused presentation. It was very good, excellent, definitely. So my name is Jean-Pierre Muller. I'm the head of the Wallonia Export Investment Agency office in Ho Chi Minh City. So AWEX is our acronym. I've been here since a little bit more than a year. Previously, I was posting in countries as diverse as the United States, India, China, South Africa, and more. I'm not saying this to show off, just to tell you that I've been in many countries before. By the way, Vietnam is my last one before retirement. And I can say that I'm very impressed by what I see and I experience here. Vietnam is truly the growth champion of the Southeast Asian zone, which is itself probably the only major economic region with a high growth rate at the moment. So it's a very important country, I think, to consider as a potential export market. And what struck me first when I arrived here in Vietnam was the optimism of the people. And that reminded me a little bit of my past experience in Shanghai in 1994. So it's long time ago. But I had the same feeling at that time, that you see the people are very optimistic. They feel that the future is theirs and that the present is better than the past and the future will be better than the present. So there is a very enthusiastic atmosphere that transcends yourself, and you feel carried along. So it's a very exciting experience to live here and to see that. And the second thing that struck me is the youth of the population. So it's been said before by Patricia, 33 years is the median age of Vietnam at the moment, compared, for example, to 42 years old in Belgium and France, and 45 years old in Germany and Spain, and even more, 49 years old for Japan. So we can really talk about the youth dividends here, the difference between the growth rate, the real growth rate of the economy and the rate of increase of demographics. So there is this difference which create this youth dividend, as the economists call it. So Vietnam definitely is a country of great potential, big potential, and it's also a country well organized, I must say. But it's not an easy country. It's sometimes difficult. There are obstacles to tackle, and I would name 3 of them. First one is bureaucracy, red tapeism, and corruption. These are words that we don't like, but it's a reality that we face. There has been some progress. They are taking place currently, but against corruption, I mean, but it's still a long way to go, I'm afraid. Secondly, regulatory system is complicated. We have seen it in the slides presented bravely and at full speed by Patricia. We certainly need to read this in more detail, but I'm sure everything is there in the slide, but we need to digest this, and it's the same that applies for every sector. It's a bit different by according to the sector of that you investigate, but definitely the food sector and the health sector is one of the most complicated. But the regular system is, generally speaking, complicated, changing. That's important. It changes regulatory very often, and it's also quite restrictive. There are some improvement, of course, like the free trade agreement between the European Union and Vietnam, but it's remain restrictive, generally speaking. And thirdly, I would mention the strong competition. There is an internal competition between European countries and with United States, for instance, but mostly the competition is with Asian countries. China, definitely. We have seen it in the slide of Patricia. China is the largest supplier of the country by big advance. But other big competitors for us, in particular, European exporters, is South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and also the Philippines, Thailand. So Asia and Asian countries as well. So we need to know that. We need to be prepared to face this competition. And so you may need some help, definitely. So who can help you? The clusters, of course, the European cluster like Wagalim, they are working on this together within COSME, the COSME European program and so on. There are the TPOs like us at the AWEX, Business France, ESEX, and the likes. But if you want to go further, maybe things we can't do at TPOs level and clusters levels, are the consultancies. And I would like to just name one, my favorite. It's Desanchira, which I have known for many years before, firstly in China 25 years ago, and after 12 years later in India, in New Delhi, and now back to Desanchira as my favorite consultancy firm in Vietnam. I like their professional, and they were all different people, of course, but I can find back the same professionalism, drive, and optimism. And Desanchira practice is one of the principles that has guided my own life. If you want to receive, first learn to give. And that's very important to apply in your life, also in business. And that's exactly what they do with the portal, online portal, which is called Asia Briefing. And we've seen that there are different portal, one specifically dedicated to Vietnam. And this is really, you can find there a wealth of information that can be consulted and downloaded. I wouldn't say free of charge, because I don't like the expression free of charge, because when you hear that something is free, you tend to react saying it's free, so doesn't have value. I would say it's complementary, and that's a very big difference. It means that it's there for you, it's as a gift. So I encourage you to visit portal and see what you can get from there in terms of economic report and in terms of sectoral report, like the presentation we just heard from Patricia. So that was my page of free publicity for Desanchira. Now I want to do some, you're welcome. I want to do some self-publicity, if I may do to enter my just 5 minutes of speech. Free publicity for us for the economic mission that Yuan just mentioned. So we organize an economic mission to Vietnam in the last week of November. It's dedicated for Wallonian companies. I'm sorry for the others. It's free of charge for our companies. And we will organize a full week of program, B2B, B2G, for our companies in this week of the 27th of November. We visit Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. There will be an information seminar, another webinar, sorry, next Tuesday, but it's 9 o'clock in Belgium. And I understand, Yuan, you will circulate the link to register for our webinar. So that was all from me. Thank you very much for listening. And it's over to you, Yuan.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. It's a good conclusion. So if I may, I would say, please, participants, if you need help, reach out to your clusters, your embassies, and of course, experts that are working on the subject. We all know registrations and exporting food supplements, and other stuff is quite time consuming. So don't hesitate to ask the help, because then this will save time and save money, because at the end they know better their job. So that's what we recommend. We also try to get other European funds to help SMEs to go internationalizations. I would take back the case studies of Patricia, that you made market studies for one companies. And actually, we are also having this type of support that SMEs can get financial support to engage an expert to help them in that field. So I will, of course, circulate the recorded video, the slides, and also the link to the webinars for Belgian companies. So our participants, you will receive all this information in by the end of the week, I would say, very quickly. So I can't see, I will just check again if there's some QR sessions. I don't see other questions. So I think we can end the webinar here, but of course it is not end of for our companies. It's only the start, and I really hope a big success for them. And I will share the contact of Patricia and the association, so you will get everything by my email. So thank you again, Patricia and Jean-Pierre, for this webinar. Very interesting, and hope we're gonna get a lot of demand from SMEs. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.